A major part of the Buddhist teaching is on the study of the mind. It's not about blind faith and religious connotation of Creator and God. It's about study of one's own mind. That's very important, because you have to know, in order to practice meditation, in order to know your human nature, or your nature in relationship to the world, to all parties of the world, then you have to study the mind. So the mind is the most important concept in the Buddhist teaching, and we have been doing that all the time. The mind consists of 8 consciousnesses. The first one, external environments. What are our externalities? What are externalities that we are confronted with? External to our mind. What are those? Objects, sound, smell, taste, and touch. What are objects? All those we can see. All objects of the world that you can, if you can feel, you can see, those are the objects. They are as small as protons and electrons and neutrons, and as big as mountains and oceans, and you name them, whatever you can see. These are your externalities, external to you. The next is sound. You cannot see sound, but you listen to sound. Sound is another kind of externality. And then smell, and then taste, and then touch. You may not have eyes, you may not have the listening skill, you may not have, maybe you lose the smell, you lose the taste, but maybe you still have the sense of touch. So all these are externalities that is external to your mind. And these 5 include almost everything in the universe, as big as the galaxy, as small as neutrons and electrons. These are external environments, external to your mind. Why do we have to study all these? Because to study your own mind, you need to know all these. What is external to your mind, internal to your mind, and how does your mind work? How does every thought come about? How do you maintain the right wholesome thought? How do you know that a bad thought comes up? A bad thought of lying, killing, intoxication, egoistic, selfishness, greediness, hatred, jealousy, anxiety, depression. How does every thought comes up? The Buddha said we have to analyze every thought. We have to see every thought. In order to do that, we have to know how the mind works. So, we have externalities. We perceive externalities. Perception through the 5 sensory organs. Through our 5 sensory organs, we perceive externalities. And one of these 5, the eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, and body consciousness. That we all know. I'm just giving a brief summary. So these are the 5 consciousnesses that perceive externalities. But they themselves, they just have the perception function. They don't rationalize, they don't intellectualize, they don't analyze. Do your eyes analyze things? Your eardrums analyze sound? No. They just perceive them. And then, what's next in the summary? Then after we perceive all these through perceptions, we have cognition. That's the 6th consciousness that we have. We have the forefront 5 consciousness, and then we come to the 6th consciousness, we call it the mano. Usually if we use an example in Mano, we call that the Mano is the name of the manager. And all these 5 eye, ears, nose, tongue, body, they are the salesman and the sales lead at the front end. And behind it, the Mano controls everything, the manager. The manager controls all this front end personnel. Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body. The Mano is extremely important. The manager, the Mano consciousness. You have that consciousness in you. And what's the function of this cognition, the Mano consciousness? Various functions of cognitive process, including interpretation, rationalization, intellectualization of the perception. In other words, the manager can go to dig up past files, budget for the future. The eyes cannot budget for the future. Can the eyes budget for the future? The ears budget for the future? Only the Mano, the manager. The manager had the right to get to access to past files. That's the reason why you remember. So that's the reason why you become sad when you remember something that induced your sadness. That's why you become depressed when you remember something that you don't like, you dislike. So the Mano could refer to the past, worry about the future, and control or manipulate or exercise the present. That's the Mano in you. The Mano in you is responsible for all the bad deeds, the good deeds, the neutral deeds that you are doing or you will be doing or you have done. So the Mano sometimes could be the culprit of your bad action, the culprit of your jealousy, your hatred, your depression, your ego. That's your ego. That's working with your ego. The Mano is not the ego, you know. The Mano is just the manager. So what is the next consciousness? We have 8, right? So now we count 6. What is the 7th consciousness? The ego attachment. So the Mano consciousness can go to all images of the past, present, and future. It can dream also, right? In dreaming, you go into the past, you worry about the future too. So the 7th consciousness is, in the Sanskrit language, is called manas. The manas consciousness, which is the ego attachment. Everybody came with this ego. You were born with it. You already have it when you were a baby. You already have it when you were in the womb of the mother's body. That's the origin of all the bad deeds, of all the egoistic feeling, of all the egoistic behavior that you have. You may not realize it, but it's there. The ego attachment. The 7th, the manas consciousness. And the manas consciousness, or the ego attachment, personalize everything. Personalize everything you see, personalize everything you hear, personalize everything you feel, you touch, you think. He started to personalize everything. He's the internal commentator in you. You give your egoistic comment on almost everything. And that's the problem. You egoize it. You don't know about it. You habitually have been doing it. You may not know about it. You have been greedy. You don't think you're greedy. You have been lazy. You don't think you're lazy. You always sink into depression. You don't even know about it. You may know about it, but you can't get out of it. All the anxiety, the phobia, the fear, everything. So that's your manas that's working. And the manas only care about the ego. If I can give you an example, using a company as an example, what is this manas? That's the director of the company. He cares about nothing except the profit, about his own profit, the shareholders. The manager works, but he's just cared about his own profit, the price of the stock. He doesn't care about anything at all, just about his own profit motive. That's you. You've been caring about only yourself and nobody else. That's your ego. You can't get rid of it until you become the Buddha, until you become the Arahat. or in different stages of enlightenment. In the first stage of Sotapanna, second stage of Sakritagamin, third stage of Anagamin, and the fourth stage of Arahat. You have different stages of minimization of your ego. The more ego you eliminate, the higher level you get. Up to the Arahat level, no more ego. No more ego left. When you don't have any ego left, you're out from life and death. No more life and death. No more reincarnation. You always have to go through the loop of reincarnation. You and me, we're in life and death, which we call samsara. Poor guys, you and me. We're always in samsara. When we die out this body, we take another body. We go through the same sufferings. Aging, sickness, death. You name them. Relationships, you name them. We're going through all these in life and death. And you've got this ego. I've got this too. Unless you're an arahat, no more ego left. And of course, the manas consciousness, personalization and arousal. When you start to personalize, you arouse emotions in you. You are breeding mental afflictions in you. Mental afflictions of what? Jealousy, hatred, greediness, ignorance, pride, fraudulence, you name them, depressions, anxieties. We all have all these things. If you start to put all these mental afflictions, there's no end to the list of mental afflictions. I was giving a lecture at University of Hong Kong just about, I don't know, in May, and the topic of the lecture was how to overcome emotional challenges. At the end of the session, we had discussions with some professors and some students, and we all said that if everybody is forced to give a list of emotion, of mental afflictions and emotions, the list is inexhaustible. You can't even, there's no end to mental afflictions. Because jealousy, hatred, anxiety, all this is just the broad term that summarize all the mental afflictions in us. Because you could have a mixture of them. If you talk to a psychologist, or anybody who is involved with the study of the mind or of psychology of the mind, feelings are very complicated. Emotions are very complicated. Some emotions you don't even know, you don't have a name for it, because it's a mixture, a part of all ingredients put into one. How do you term something that is a mixture of jealousy, hatred, and anxiety, and depression, and what do you call that? Aggressiveness. It's all a mixture. These are just the general broad terms. That comes from the ego. That's why people are getting more and more sickness psychologically, mind sickness, because of the breeding of the ego. So these are the 7 consciousnesses. And there's an 8th consciousness. Why there's an 8th? Because we say, okay, perception consciousness, cognition consciousness, ego consciousness. What happened when we died? All these consciousnesses are gone? No more of them? What happened when we died? What sustained our life? What is that in us that sustained our life from day 1 to day 2 to the end when we died? There's always a sustaining consciousness, a storehouse consciousness. And that's what we call the store consciousness. And in the Sanskrit language, it's called the alaya consciousness. What does alaya mean? Alaya stores everything up for everything that you have done. If you use an analogy, it's the same as your computer memory. unlimited, immeasurable memory in you that's been stored in there. Once you key into the keyboard, it gets into the computer. It can never be erased. It always stayed in there. So that's the storehouse consciousness. And that's the essence that is responsible for the reincarnation, for the life and death. All these other things will go. Perception, no more eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, no more manos. They're all fire. They got all fire. The ego, what? What would the directors do? The directors fire the manager, fire all the salesmen and sales ladies. And what happened? They're still holding the shares. They're still holding the directorship. And the manners shrink into the alaya consciousness, and with this, roll into the next body. They changed the name of the company. The name of this company is Mr. Jackson, Wilson, Jeanette, whatever name you have. And when you die, what happened? You change the name of your company. You become John. But the directors are still there. The shareholders are the same. Where are they? They're in that company. That's the store consciousness. That's the whole eight consciousness in a very simple PowerPoint slide. We are going to study this in detail. How it works. How does the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body work? How does our cognition works? Why do we personalize everything? Why do we become egoistic? How do we contemplate every thought? Can we contemplate on the arising of a thought? Create our watchfulness, our mindfulness on every thought, and gear every thought to enlightenment, or we gear every thought to hell. You are the master of that gear. You gear yourself to hell in one life. In another life, you gear yourself to heaven. But heaven is not the ultimate way to go. Because why do you go to heaven? Because you have done good deeds. When you do all these good deeds, you qualify for going to heaven. And then when the time is due that you die in heaven, there's still death in heaven. You just enjoy millions of years of life. Now maybe you will enjoy 100 years of life, but when you go to heaven, millions of years, and then when you die what? Maybe you reincarnate into a human again with a lot of riches in you. When you become a billionaire and become the richest, you become the most handsome, the most beautiful, or the richest person on earth. And because of the riches, you get into misdeeds again. There's a danger that the richer you are, the more karmic energy you created. People always say, I'm not handsome enough, I'm not beautiful enough, I'm not rich enough. But when they have that, they started to create bad karma. And what did they do when they create this bad karma? They get into reincarnation again. It's a loop. We are always looking for that thing, quote unquote, that once we get them, we get into trouble, we lose it, and then we hope to get the same thing again. That's what we call fame, reputation, wealth, and all that. You use all means to get those, and once you get those, you create means to downgrade yourself, to get into crimes and to get into sins and guilty and whatever you have, you thought about, and then you get into the loop of reincarnation again. So that's a summary. Store of present and past karmic energy, and that's reincarnation of life and death. This whole slide looks very simple. To some people it may not be simple, but the Buddha spent years in explaining it in detail. And that school of thought in the Buddhist teaching is what? The Yogacara approach. You heard of Yogacara? Yuga in the Cantonese language, or Yu Qie Heng Pai, or Wei Shi Pai, Wei Shi, or mere consciousness, the study of mere consciousness. And there are millions and millions of words are written about this school. Did you get a chance to read them? Or what have you been reading? You have been reading something else. But let me tell you, there's a lot of depth, a lot of wisdom in the Yogacara knowledge of the whole world. Get to the next one. How do we study consciousness? We use 9 perspectives. The objects of each consciousness, modes of knowledge, moral nature, realms of its activities, concomitant mental functions, necessary preconditions, how does each consciousness function, spiritual transformation, how do we transform each consciousness into enlightenment, and leading sentient beings to enlightenment. So we use this 9 perspectives or topics to study each consciousness. And that's exactly what the Buddha has been talking about on this. We've been talking about only the first 5 consciousnesses, and we already have covered objects, modes of knowledge, moral nature, and then I think we stopped at realms of its activities. So let's get to the realm of activities, and I think we already have talked about the realm of activities. In other words, in the first 5 consciousness, the eyes, the ears, nose, tongue, and body, what realms are these consciousness active? Where are they active? And what are the concomitant mental functions that are always working with this consciousness? I think we have been talking about that in my previous lecture. And let's just carry on from there. It looks like a very complicated diagram. 1 to 8 represents the 8 consciousnesses, and F means fully active. In some of these realms, fully active, and P means partially active. And these 9 grounds are the stages of our enlightenment. The lowest, without enlightenment at all, almost like a hell dwellers, ordinary beings, and the 6 desire heavens. And then the first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana, infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothing whatsoever, neither cognition or non-cognitions. These are the jhanas that we go for meditation. In meditation, it goes higher level, every level go up. As you increase your level of enlightenment, you lose your coarse, root, and unrefined consciousnesses. Remember, we're only talking about the first 5 consciousness. We haven't talked about the manas and the 8 yet, because we haven't touched that part. Ordinary being, even at the heavenly beings, all the first 5 consciousnesses are active. But if we go to the first jhana, we don't have the tongue and the nose consciousness. They're not working anymore. What does this mean? Can you get anything from it? Why? Only the lower level required the first 5 consciousnesses. At a little higher level in the first jhana, they don't require the nose and the tongue. The nose and the tongue is only for lower end beings. Why? Let's get to the next one. Sentient beings in the higher level, which is the first jhana in the higher level, do not depend on muscle nourishment, which is connected with nose and tongue. Their food is taken through mental contact of joy. In other words, our food is rice, bread, vegetables, and if you're not vegetarian, maybe meat, chicken, ducks, goat, cows and pigs. You take muscle nourishments, which is connected with the nose and the tongue. Your tongue like to taste it. Your taste buds like to taste fish, so you kill fish. You like to take cow, pigs, and chickens and ducks, so you kill them for food to satisfy your tongue. In a higher level, they don't eat chickens and ducks. Their food is through mental contact of joy. The crudest form of food is taken by mouthfuls via the smell of nose and the taste of the tongue. This kind of bodily nutriment is subject to decay and changes, is only seen in the realm of desires. In other words, in the realm of desires, so to speak, sexual desire, relationship desire, they eat flesh, animal flesh. They taste animal blood. But in a higher level, when they discard the sensuous desire, they don't eat meat. They don't eat meat anymore. They are in contact of joy, and they're in meditative joy. So even in this world, maybe high up in the mountains somewhere as a hermit, some meditators, they may not need to eat any food. Every day they're just in meditation. Meditation is the food. The joy is. So that's the reason why when you enter into the temple, remember there's a laughing Buddha, and underneath the laughing Buddha there's a slogan carved on a stone. It says, "Always maintain a joyous mind." Can you maintain a joyous mind? You cannot. But in the first jhana level, their food is meditation. When they're in a meditative state, that's their food. They don't need to eat food like what we're doing. Our food is subject to decay and changes. We are like a test tube. At one end, we'll put in all this food. Chicken, ducks, hamburgers, bread. On the other end, we'll let out the filthy part of it. So we're like a bag of impurities. We're a bag that put in a lot of impurities in our bag and a tube, and then all these impurities come out. So when people of the first jhana, you know why they don't want to come to this world? You really stink. They don't like to come to this world. This world is a world of stinkiness. You may not know about it. When you smell a hamburger, it tastes good. But when those first jhana people, when they smell a hamburger, they want to walk away miles away. They don't want to smell hamburgers and chickens and ducks. They're all yucky to them. But we like them. People here, we like them. So we're like a bag of impurities. At one end, we put in all this food. On the other end, we let them out. Coarse food is effective for nourishment for a coarse organism, but is of no use for a finer organism. Higher and higher consciousness level must be fed with finer and finer kinds of nourishment, and they call it mental joy. So now, when we study the first 5 consciousness, what do we get from this? Only lower end organism require all the first 5 consciousness. At a little higher level, they don't require the nose and the tongue. At the higher first jhana, no nose and the tongue. They don't need it. At the second jhana, all the first 5 consciousnesses, they discard them already. They're too coarse, they're too unrefined. They're a burden to them. Eyes, nose, ears, tongue, and body are burdens. You may not find it a burden to you, but they find it, these are burdens. In the second jhana, they don't require the first 5 senses, the third, the fourth. And in a much higher level, they only have the 6th and the 7th and the 8th. And the 6th become partial. At the highest level, they only have the 8 consciousness left. And that's the happiest, the higher level. But even at the 9th level, they're still subject to reincarnation. Because you know why? Because that they still have the ego. The F is the Lalaya consciousness. They still have the 8 consciousness. They still have the tainted ego consciousness in them. Only when they get rid of the ego consciousness would they be out of life and death. So even at the 9th level, they still subject themselves to life and death. Only when you get out. When you get out, you change your eighth consciousness, you transform your eighth consciousness into complete enlightenment. That's the stage when we call it the Arahat stage. But they're not at the Buddha stage yet, because they still have a method of transformation. They still attach to Buddhism. But suffice it to say, with Buddhism, with the boat, they get onto Victoria already. With the boat, they get onto Victoria, they already have crossed the ocean of life and death. But they attach to the boat. You got to leave the boat. They still attach to the method. They still attach to the method of transformation. In a complete unattachment, even the method has to go. You have to throw away Buddhism. Don't let Buddhism affect you, but that's at a higher level. We need the Buddhism now to get rid of the ego. Once the ego is gotten rid of, even Buddhism has to go. Don't attach to Buddhism. No such thing as Buddhism at that level. There is Buddhism, but there isn't Buddhism. There's Buddha, but there isn't Buddha. It's just an expression. But if without expression, how can you express it? You need an expression. What is called Buddhism is not Buddhism. That's the reason why it is called Buddhism. You understand what I mean? What is Buddhism is not Buddhism. That's why it is called Buddhism. Yeah. That's what the Diamond Sutra says. You know what level we're at right now? We're at this level. We're at number 1 level. You're still attached to your fame, your reputation, your wealth, your health, your relationship. You still want to be the director of a company. You still want to make billions of dollars. You want to form a family. You want to have a handsome boyfriend. You want to have a beautiful girlfriend. You want to have kids. You want to have, I don't know what you have. You want to have all these things. All these things will prevent you from going any further. Your parents may not like to hear what I'm saying, because if you come here and they say don't form a family, you become a monk and a nun, and they will come to look for trouble. But that's what it is. The relationship pulls you down. Now, once we understand the realm of activities, how are these 5 consciousnesses active in what realm, what is our next perspective that we study? We study when these 5 consciousnesses work, how do they work? There are certain mental functions that work with them to get us into trouble. We call them concomitant mental functions. These mental functions arise at the same time when these consciousnesses arise. And you got to be realized, you got to be mindful of those. Sometimes when we do meditation, we say we have to be mindful, but you don't know what mindfulness means. People say, some meditators say, you've got to be mindful, but you don't know what it means. What do you mean by mindful? You got to be mindful of all these mental concomitants. That's why it's called mindfulness meditation. How mindful we are. What should we be mindful of? We study all these concomitant mental functions. How many of these mental functions that help, that assist our 8 consciousnesses to cognize, to rationalize, to intellectualize, to analyze? You know, there are 51 concomitant mental functions working with our eyes, our ears, our nose, our tongue, our mano manager, our manas manager, our ego, our our store consciousness. All these 51 are the what? Are the ministers of the kings, of the 8 kings. Kings, these consciousnesses, we call them, if we use analogy, these are the 8 kings. These kings have ministers to help them to do bad deeds and good deeds, you know. They pull you down. There are 11 good ministers and the rest, and 26 bad ministers. In a parliament with 11 good ministers and 26 bad ministers, who are in control? Who is the majority? The bad guys are in majority. I'm not referring to the government now. I'm referring to the government of your own mind. You know, in the government, in the parliament of your own mind, you have 26 bad ministers and 11 good ministers. And the rest are what? The rest are housekeepers. Generally, interactive functions are the housekeepers. Particular functions are particular housekeepers. Unwholesome functions are the bad 26 ministers. Wholesome functions are the good ministers. And the indeterminate functions are what? Are those sitting on the fence. They're sitting on the fence. Those are the cunning guys. Whoever is in power, they go to where they are. They are indeterminate. So with 51 of these ministers working in the parliament of your mind, you are responsible for all the actions and speech and thought that you have been doing. You may not even know about it. You may not even know that you have such a parliament in your mind. You gotta clean up this parliament. You have to know your parliament. You have to know each ministers. You've got to be in control of these ministers. That's what the Buddha said. You've got to be in control of your own mind. What happens if you're in control? If you're in control, you are a much happier man or woman in this life. And when this life is due, you go to enlightenment. Do you want to do that? Or you don't care about the parliament of your own mind, you just do as this functioning of the parliament wants you to do, because your 26 bad ministers are always getting into trouble. You get into drinking, lying, killing, sexual misconduct. I don't know. What else? You got to watch out. Dangerous. Your mind is dangerous. My mind is dangerous. You're working, you're interacting with people with dangerous minds, including your own. That's the reason why when you open newspapers and you listen to Google News, how many things happen in the world today? What happened when we open the newspapers and try to summarize what happened in the whole world? The parliament of each mind is functioning to bring the whole world maybe to mishaps. And sometimes we're happy. Sometimes we're not happy. But most of the time, we're going through sufferings. There's no denying. There's no denying that life is suffering. You may not agree. No, I'm happy sometimes. I'm happy. Yeah, you're happy. But if you are always confronted with the probability of dying, sickness, aging, not probabilities. You'll get to it. You'll get to death. You'll get to sickness. You'll get to aging. It's not a probability. It's a fact. How can you be happy if you know that you will die? You will be sick. You will be aging. Plus all these other sufferings that you have. Sometimes you could be happy, but for a short time, not for long. Finally, you have to confront death, sickness. If you are young, you may not think that way. If you are young, that word, death, may be remote to you, but actually it's not. There's no difference in age as to when you die. You could die at young age, you could die at old age. But young people tend to think that death is so far away, but it's not. Death is what? It's within a breath. Death is not within a day. It's within a breath. Squeeze your nostrils. How long can you last? It's just, if the breath stops, you're dead. It's not tomorrow or the day after. Death is in between a breath. But you still want to enjoy yourself, right? You still want to fame, reputation, relationship, parties. That's us. That's our habitual thinking. The Buddha said, we better do something about it. Don't roll into life and death anymore. Let's all do something about it. Get into enlightenment.